My name is Tom Jenkins. We're going to be discussing the Brazilian market today. I'm really honoured to be joined by a very distinguished panel here, running from my far right-hand side, so it's from your left. We have Eduardo Santander, who's the Chief Executive of the European Travel Commission. We have Simon O'Connell from Global Blue, who's just done a study on the Brazilian market, I believe. We have Colin Stewart, then from Air Europa, one of the big players outbound and from Latin America, who's joined us today. We have Marco Ferraz, who's just agreed to walk up and join us on stage, who's the tour expert because he's the chief executive from Brastor, the Brazilian Tour Operators Association. And we have Lawrence Reinisch from World Travel Market Brazil. So we have a very distinguished panel for you. So do give them a round of applause, please. It's my job just to start off, just to give a bit of background on the Brazilian market. This is some research which ETOA has put together, and I hope will be coming on the screen. You don't have it? That's excellent. One moment. There is a PowerPoint presentation. Thank you. Gosh, that was pretty good. Well, rapid recovery. Just some background demographics. Brazil's population, it's got 198.7 million people. This is changing, I hasten to add, as populations tend to. Its growth rate is 1.1% a year. Therefore, you can confidently expect it to exceed 200 million people very shortly. It's a relatively young population, as you can see from the demographic curves just to the left of that statement. Very diverse ethnicity. There's very strong cultural links between Brazil and Europe, especially with Portugal, Italy, Spain, and Germany. In many ways, Brazil is one of the sort of unspoken and unrecognized European diasporas within Europe, and its potential in that area we may be discussing in a minute. Its richest cities are Sao Paulo, 20 million inhabitants, a genuine global monster. Rio de Janeiro, 11.8 million, and Belo Horizonte, 5.7 million. It's got 70 million internet users, and they're the world's most active social media community. But TV is still the most dominant source of information, and telenovelas reach 35 to 40% of the population. That's a staggering proportion. The Olympic Games would be delighted to hit 35 to 40% of the population. And it's extremely influential, with some episodes set in Italy, Greece, Portugal, the Netherlands, China, and India, for example. Economic indicators are not quite as buoyant as we thought. GDP is $2.3 trillion. GDP per capita on a purchasing parity. It's very dangerous to use purchasing parity. We do it because everyone does it. On a purchasing parity, it's $12,100. Purchasing parity is no good when you're traveling as a tourist and you're using real exchange rates. But it gives you a comparative idea of how people feel. GDP real growth rate is 0.9%. Quite slow for an emerging economy. Unemployment rate, 5.5% and falling. Inflation, 5.4% and rising. The Gini coefficient, this thing we saw at the last seminar on Japan, those of you who are here, is 51.9%. America is roughly 50%. So it's roughly the same inequality measure as the United States. Somewhere like Japan is 37%, somewhere like Scandinavia is 20%. So it's not severely unequal, but it's comparatively so. we're seeing in the economy consumer-led growth. Domestic consumption rather than investments have been dominating the country's growth. Consumer indebtedness has increased, and the middle class has grown by 40 million people, but be warned, middle class in Japan, according to, European Travel Commission and World Tourism Organization, middle class is defined as families with a monthly household income of more than $600. So it's more than $7,200 a year. That doesn't really qualify you for a European vacation. The outbound departures are growing. They've grown wonderfully in recent years. From 2007 to 2012, you've seen 3 million outbound departures from Brazil, and expenditure going up and up and up through towards 50 billion real. Where do they go? Important graph. Well, recently, increasing numbers are going to the United States. The relaxation of the visa regime in America, well, certainly the speeding up of the visa regime in America, has led to a boom in American tourism. 21% last year, I believe, went to the United States. 18% went to Argentina, then Uruguay, then Europe. And these are the destinations in Europe which they touch first. You'll see that this is France, is 5%, Spain 5%, Portugal 5%, Italy 4%, UK 4%, Germany 3%. Very, very strong showing for Europe outbound from Brazil. But we're expecting the proportion going to the United States to grow. It's inevitable. America is an extremely attractive destination for Brazil. And this shows you the shape, and this presentation is going to be available on our website after the seminar. And this shows you the shape and changing pattern of outbound, the outbound demand from Brazil for the various countries of Europe. You will see that there's considerable jockeying of position between Germany, the UK, Italy, and Portugal, where they are sort of interchanging with one another. Outgoing tourism expenditure has grown almost in parallel with the outbound growth. There's nothing unusual to be seen there. So things to note. Domestic travel is growing at a faster rate than international travel. In 2011, the proportion of international domestic departure was 11%, a 4% decrease to 2003. So the shape of overall demand within the Brazilian tourism economy is shifting towards domestic travel rather than directly into international departures. But this is to be expected with an increase in wealth inside the economy. As more people become wealthy, the first thing they start doing is traveling domestically before they go abroad. Rising disposable incomes initially lead to short-haul rather than long-haul trips. Sorry, I just repeated myself. International travel in 2012, 7.9 million Brazilians traveled abroad. It's a 9% increase up. Business trips account for 30% of all departures. Growth of international departures between 2000 and 2012, 2007 and 12 is 68%. Growth forecast of international departures between 2012 and 2017 is 17%. They're expecting a slowing down of this growth. One of my favorite subjects, the 2014 World Cup and 2016 Olympic Games, are not expected to have a negative impact on outbound tourism. They still think Brazilians will leave during these periods. The US is now the most popular place for Brazilians to go. The strength of the real against Latin American currencies has contributed to the attractiveness of South American destinations such as Argentina and Uruguay, along with their physical proximity. And due to strong cultural links as well as cultural and historical attractions, Europe is also a key destination for Brazilians. The average length of stay when traveling to Europe is 11 nights, and this is a pie graph showing you what the average, what the average pattern is. This is a leisure departure by type. Euromonitor provided us with this information. Slightly opaque what it means. We think it means that these single people who appear to make up 42% of all the people leaving are not traveling wholly individually, but they may be booking themselves on other departures such as tours. The groups that you see that occupy 19% are people that have gathered themselves together into a group and are moving as a special interest group. What is bad about Europe and Brazil? High prices, it's unsurprising. As of October 2013, the real has declined by more than 25% since 2010. It's going to be an issue price. Hotel quality, often inferior to that advertised on the website. Very serious allegation. I'm surprised that the internet review sites haven't cleaned that up. Crowded attractions and long queues, closed attractions, language barriers and cultural barriers, problems with visa procedures, and that's students coming to Europe. Obviously the adults don't have many problems with visas, I hope they won't. And customs. Brazilian credit cards not widely accepted. Why do they come here? Much more importantly, what's the pull, not the block? Multiple cultures in the same continent. They obviously like multiculturalism in Brazil. Well-preserved historical sites. There are many religious sites here. Brazil is obviously a very Catholic country. Cultural activities. They like the ways of the old continents, perceived as being the old country. Europe's gastronomy. I like the idea that what the blogosphere is saying about Europe, according to UNWO, says that there is a perceived sophistication in Europe, as if the sophistication is slightly illusory, but at least we have the perception of sophistication over here. There are plenty of shopping opportunities, and I dare say we may hear from Global Blue what those mean. Brazilians are famously major shoppers when it goes to North America. European sports teams they like, and it's perceived as being a liberal destination. That's the end of my presentation, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening to me for that. I think, and I will just start off, if I may, with Eduardo from ETC, my opposite number. It's certainly when it comes to a crowded table here. Eduardo, where does Brazil figure in your list of priorities as an origin market?
Well, thank you, Tom, and thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the audience, of course, for being here. Quite high is the answer. And just to not say that, but to prove it, we just signed a memorandum of understanding a couple of hours ago with Brastoa, where we want to invest more in the relationship with Brazil. And again, not just promoting Europe, but promoting tourism as a whole. Tourism flows between Brazilians and Europeans. Together with the European Commission, we are trying to enhance the relationship, to make travel easier, more attractive, and of course a little bit more sophisticated in the way we promote Europe, in my case, in Brazil. We, through this ethnographic study that it's mentioned in your presentation, we realized that we were doing quite a bad job in the last 10 years in Brazil. So we were selling a Europe that was not interesting for Brazilians. So now we're doing it the opposite way around. We're asking Brazilians, what do you expect? Because, Tom, I think you have heard that from me already a couple of times. Value is not just about money, but it's about meeting expectations. If a product meets or a destination meets your expectation, you don't care much about money.
Marco, you're our star guest panelist, so to speak. How does Europe figure in Brazilian tour operators' outgoing plans? I mean, is it perceived as being a very strong thing to sell? Is it something they're happy to sell?
Yes, it's happy. Most of the tour operators of Brastoa sell domestic. 70% of the total volume is for Brazil. 30% outbound. But we are talking about 6 million passengers only in Brastoa. It's about 1.8 million passengers for international destinations. I would say that number one is United States, number two is Europe, Number 3 is Argentina. What we've been talking, and we have the help of ETC now, is that we find lots of destinations, lots of countries that come to Brazil and invest institutional and co-op marketing with the tour operators. So we feel that if Europe comes to Brazil and invest together with the tour operators and in an institutional way, we're gonna double the number of Brazilians to Europe in a very few months. Another thing is the connections. We have just a few airlines coming to Brazil. I'm very happy that Air Europe is flying to Salvador, and they're gonna start 5 times a week in December. Is that right?
December the 16th.
Yeah. Yes. We have TAP with 75 flights a week, and they are flying not only to São Paulo and Rio, the axis that we see in Brazil, but they are flying to the northeast, the south, central Brazil, and this is very smart because we have infrastructure problems in Brazil. Of course, for the World Cup, we are fixing these problems. We may have space for other companies to São Paulo and Rio, but they are doing the smart thing, as American Airlines is doing with all Brazil, and they now have more than 120 flights a week to Brazil. So I think that we should bring more airlines to come to Brazil.
I mean, really, on that note, I mean, Colin, I mean, you represent Air Europa. Could you explain a little bit about Air Europa?
Sure.
And then explain where Brazil fits in that picture, and what's the shape of demand, do you think?
Sure, thank you. I'd love to share a little bit about Air Europa. I guess Air Europa is a Spanish airline. However, from the UK market and as a business, we've changed our strategy over the last 4 or 5 years to really focus on Latin America as our key business. And so for that period, over the last 2 or 3 years specifically, we've really enhanced our route network. Where does Brazil fit into that route network? Historically, we have always flown to Salvador da Bahia, and that's been successful for us. We have noticed a real peak in traffic, specifically from London, over the last 3-4 months. Of course, you can make the connection with the World Cup coming up, but we have seen a real interest and a growth in Salvador. With the announcement of Sao Paulo starting in December, again, we're confident that there is enough traffic, enough demand to support these routes. And again, long term, Brazil for us will ultimately, I think, become probably one of our number one Latin market, Latin region as we move forward in the future. There are a lot of opportunities for us, and again, really the growth and the expansion is only limited by our kind of our desire and our intention. So yeah, we see Brazil being a key part of our route network moving forward.
Lawrence, you're representing World Travel Market Brazil. You must have a very good perspective on the demand for European product in Brazil as it's expressed at events like the one we're attending and this seminar is taking part in. I mean, where does Europe fit into your picture?
Well, I think that we really are seeing a market that's really getting more sophisticated, as you have showed out in your presentation. The past 10 years, there has been an increase in 40 million people in Brazilian middle class. That's, more than whole countries that have become middle class in just 10 years. That's an amazing number, but I would say that most of these people who have just come into middle class, even though they're starting already traveling abroad, they first go to Argentina, which is the closest one, and because of the proximity of Spanish to Portuguese, is the easiest one to approach. Then the tendency will go to the US, because there is an enormous number of flights to the US, and also there is all the very common knowledge of the theme parks and the appeal that the US has to the youth market. And then it comes a point where even these very recently acquired middle class will also go as the older middle classes has been going for so many years to Europe. It really becomes like a more elaborate destination for most of this new middle class. We really have to take into account that most people that go to Europe, different from the US, where they still, a very large part still see US through the prism of the theme parks or for the shopping spree. Most people that go to Europe intend to go there for the question of culture, acquiring culture, seeing culture, and I would say culture in the most varied realms, be it the gastronomy, be it music, be it whatever, everything that encompasses culture. Still, when I see some questions of Europeans, why there is still so many people flying to the US and not so many people flying to Europe. I say there's already an enormous number, increase of number of Brazilians flying to Europe. But you also have to take into account that Rail's brand USA has been promoting the US just for the past 1 year or so. And we have had a national tourism organization from many European countries for so many years. We have a whole culture industry promoted by Hollywood and by TV that has for the past 100 years promoted the US in all its aspects. So people are much more aware of what is the US by cinema and TV than what is Europe. So I would say that the more that Europe presents itself in Brazil, also through its cultural products, films and TV production, it's going to be easier to see more Brazilians interested into Europe. If you see the television Brazil, probably 90% of the foreign series is produced in the US. I'd say at least 90%. Very, very little amounts produced elsewhere. So it's natural that people will tend to think first of US.
I mean, you touched on the extent to which Brazilians like going abroad to shop. And obviously, the United States is a great shopping destination. I think there's probably a significant tourism imbalance of payments between Europe and North America, I imagine. But we have Global Blue here, one of the great shopping experts. And I was wondering, Simon, if you could just brief us on what the shape of Brazilian shopping habits are in Europe.
Well, they tend to see the US as a shopping-only destination. Miami, Orlando, New York, there is often a one-way traffic with very light suitcases going one way and very heavy going the other. It's interesting mentioning the cultural aspect, because Brazilians love coming to Europe for shopping, but as opposed to other traveler groups where we see shopping as by far the biggest priority, Brazilians are also very focused on culture. Now that could be historic culture or high art, but I think increasingly they're viewing the stores of the luxury brands like Louis Vuitton and Prada as culture. And I think it's right to say that the Louis Vuitton store in Paris is the second most visited destination. So we're seeing that they're very focused on culture, but whether that's shopping culture or historic culture is open to debate, and that's what we've been investigating.
And I mean, are there significant tax advantages to people going? And there was an allusion on the slide back there saying that one of the problems they were experiencing were customs, and it sounded like border customs. And I can't believe it's customs going into Europe. I imagine it's customs coming back from Europe. But what is is there a price advantage in terms of tax?
Well, there's a price advantage both ways. The Brazil custo, or the Brazil cost, can add 300 or 400% to imported goods to Brazil.
Right.
So many famous fashion, leather goods, and electronic brands are maybe 4 times more expensive in Brazil than the US and 3 times than Europe. There's also, of course, the sales tax or VAT refund that Global Blue provides. And if you're talking about importing goods back, each country has its own limit on what can be imported. And that's, of course, down to the traveller, what they import. But in terms of, say, fashion and luxury goods brands, the difference is enormous. For example, Topshop in the JK Mall in Sao Paulo is almost as expensive as Prada and Louis Vuitton because of the many, many taxes which are piled upon it. So it's actually next door in the mall to what we would consider true luxury brands. Does that answer the question?
It does. It's quite a shocking thought. I mean, one of the things that I want to move away from shopping in a second, get back to, really open it up to the audience because I'm sure you've got questions. But one of the things driving the behaviour of Chinese people in Europe, for example, is the fact that there is a huge price advantage in buying goods in Europe. And what you're saying is that for Brazilians travelling over to Europe, that price differential is really staggering, is what you're saying.
It is the biggest price differential of all the major outbound traveller countries that we deal with.
Right. That's Eduardo.
Tom, if you can add some value to this discussion regarding shopping, because actually our ethnographic study is saying us that Europe is not seen as a expensive destination or relative expensive destination. Actually, even the European crisis is seen as an opportunity. So Brazilians like to buy cheap and to find and buy the discount, and they see this as an opportunity, and this is something, an opportunity for us as well nowadays, at least during this economic downturn right now.
You need to sell sales. Sorry, please.
We have $500 in merchandise to bring from outside of Brazil, but they are very flexible. Of course.
You need a bag for the...
And we are one of the only countries in the world that can bring back 2 bags of 70 pounds, which means 32 kilos each. So the Brazilians travel with 2 bags, one inside the other, empty, and they return with 64 kilos at least.
Colin, are you reinforcing your aeroplanes out of interest?
I think we're going to have to, yes, absolutely. No, again, a lot of the airlines in Europe, we have a good baggage allowance. Certain routes that we fly to, there's a greater demand for luggage, so our luggage allowance reflects that. A lot of visiting friends and family, people going back to spend a longer period there, they tend to take a lot more luggage. But very interesting to hear about the shopping example there. So there's maybe an opportunity for us. So thank you.
Have you heard about the PlayStation 4?
I have not heard about the PlayStation 4.
The PlayStation 4 was launched in US with $399. In Brazil with 4,000 reais, which means $1.8 thousand. And Sony had to explain how was that in Brazil.
Can I give
Why?
Another example? I was interviewing a young man in Sao Paulo, and he happened to have the same laptop as me, and he bought his in the US for around $700 or $800. Mine cost around the same in pounds here. He told me that if he had bought it in Brazil, it would have come to the equivalent of $3,500.
I do feel people feel happy spending. I mean, some people feel happy spending a lot of money on things because it's expensive. I mean, is there a sort of cachet in Brazil of buying things? And do people go shop? What happens in Brazil? People spend money like this? Or
as tour operators, we have to do like a one-day shopping tour. It's strange for you to have this, but we have to do it. Even if they go to Cancun, we have to teach them how to buy there in Cancun. And sometimes in Punta Cana that they don't find a shopping mall, they become angry. I don't know where to buy things. The free shop there is so weak. I have to buy something. So it's better to go via Miami to have some malls in the trip. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Do we have any shopping-related questions out of interest in the audience, by any chance? Yes, the question at the front here.
Just thinking about the service Brazilians get in Europe, I imagine there's probably common ground that not enough Portuguese is spoken, but any reflections on the sort of quality of service and what we can do on this end to make things more appealing in terms of service and product?
I think.
Marco, please.
Go ahead, please.
Of course, Portuguese speaking is it's a differential, but we understand very well Spanish, and English is becoming our day-by-day working. Everybody is speaking. I think I would say 30 to 40% of all the tourists that come to Europe, they speak English. But Portuguese, we always say that if you have a Portuguese guide, it would help a lot, because we still sell that kind of packages, like 3 countries and in 14 days with the tour operators from Spain that we still buy from them, and the Portuguese guides makes the difference.
I think, Tim, I think this is a really easy solution for that with Brazil. And Brazilians are pretty straightforward when they travel, so, and they understand their European reality better than Americans, even, or a Canadian, and of course, better than Chinese. So the conclusion of our study is that you, as a destination, or as if you're selling another kind of product, or you are as a site or whatever, you have to get the basics completely right, and to avoid any kind of frustrations with Brazilian. Brazilians like to talk good about things, but if you do it wrong, they will talk about that as well. And it will be so it's the power of the mouth propaganda. So it's someone, if you get treated bad, or if you went to a shop and nobody could understand you, you will take care that your mates will not go to that shop. That's what we found. And another thing that I wanted to comment, Tom, on your slide regarding the top destinations in Europe, which are Portugal, Spain, Italy, and Germany. This is mainly almost true, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they stayed in those countries. I recently visited Swarovski Crystal Wars. This is in Tyrol in Austria, and I think there were like 6 or 8 buses full with Brazilians there, and there's no flights to Innsbruck or from Brazil, or they fly probably Munich, right? So, and they were spent. Are
you factoring in Innsbruck in your calculations?
Me?
No. I was talking to. I was talking. Sorry, to Colin. Innsbruck there?
No, we'll think about it. Well, this is great. It's like information gathering for me today.
Okay,
this is
that's
fantastic.
Innsbruck sounds like a tip. Sorry.
We find out a lot in the global view as well, that the Brazilians, like people from the Far East, on their first trip they will cover several countries. They may go to their country of their ancestors if they can to land, so Italy, Portugal, Spain, Germany, and then travel around. But after that they will, as many travelers do, focus in depth on one country. But often they want to see this first in a lifetime opportunity to go to Europe, 3 or 4 countries at the same time.
Sorry, Edward, I was interrupting you.
No, come on. Yeah, I mean, and the other thing that we need to think about is the huge Brazilian diaspora in Europe. And these are people going into Facebook and posting things that are not in the brochures of a tour operator. So they are acting as opinion makers and motivating people to go to places and shops and cities and villages that are not sold in any kind of brochure, or in any kind of online advertising and so on. And you can find Brazilians. I found Brazilians a couple of weeks ago in Vilnius, in the hotel. So Vilnius is definitely not, so Lithuania is definitely not a top destination for Brazilians. But they were there, making sightseeing. So that's the reality of Europe. It's so fragmented, the product, that but we come back to the other reality is air capacity, and where the airlines are bringing the people to.
I mean, you're talking about young people. I mean, how many students? I mean, how many students have the sort of money to go travelling in Brazil? How big is the youth student market for international travel in Europe? I know that there was a campaign quite recently to boost student travel in Europe from Brazil with numerical targets, but this is a separate matter. I mean, how big is the youth market in Brazil? Do you know?
It's big. I think I would say 35% of the population. Am I right? And they come to Europe for language school, Canada, New Zealand, Australia. They want to learn English. So the parents send them with 14, 15 years of age to stay here 6 months. So they start their life coming to Europe, knowing new people, new destinations. So we love to travel. As we are so far away, everywhere that you want to go, it's 8, 9, 10, 11 hours of flight. So we get used to that. So it's easy to go spend a weekend in New York, 9 hours and a half. You see a lot of that. So the students of today are the clients of tomorrow. You have to look at them.
That's important.
Yeah, of course you have to see that in Brazilian culture, people tend, I would say that parents tend to be more, patronize more their kids than in the US or in Europe. It's much more common for, for people to start working kind of later in their lives than here in Europe or the US. It's very, very natural for people to, to give this kind of reconnaissance trips, or let's say study trips to the children.
I know in Mexico there's a complete cult of, I think it's called the quinceañeras, the young girls who graduate from high school and are sent on these tours. Tours not for the faint-hearted, those of us who've had to operate these tours from Mexico. Is there anything similar in Brazil? Is there a culture of grouping kids together and sending them on educational trips lasting 30 days?
Yes, it's increasing a lot. Canada is having a lot of advantage on that. You can see in the flights 30 to 40 students to stay there 30 days or less.
Yeah.
Ireland is one key destination for the Brazilians to study English there. It's very inexpensive compared to other destinations, and you see lots of Brazilians coming.
I've got a question in the front row. And then when we finish that, there's a question in the back row. Was that a question or was that someone yawning? Yes, it was. Okay. Okay.
During your presentation, you were talking about how you had confidence that the World Cup and the Olympic Games is not going to impact on the levels of outbound tourism. I'm just wondering what kind of research you've done to back up that confidence. And the other way around, how much inbound tourism are you expecting and predicting?
The research that we've done on that was merely, I think we were reporting on Euromonitor's data on what they're expecting coming out of Brazil in 2014 and 16. So it's an external research company doing a prediction on the impact of 2014 and 16 on Brazilian outbound. It's not our research, it's somebody else's research, is what I'm saying. Well, that might be interesting. What do you think? Yeah, do you think?
I want to mention something about that. We are very angry with FIFA because they didn't give us the tickets. So any tour operator in Brazil or around the world will have access to the tickets. What is going to happen is that we're gonna, of course, work with packages for whoever owns the ticket, but we will find a way to send the Brazilians out of Brazil. We've been talking to Orlando, Cancun, Punta Cana, and Miami. They're gonna make big plazas with the World Cup mood, and then we can send all the clients to these cities. We've been talking to Mexico. By the way, Mexico didn't, this is still, they're not in the World Cup up to now. They have to play against New Zealand to find if they're coming or not, but they chartered a cruise, a ship to come to Rio, and they have 43 charter flights out of Mexico to Rio de Janeiro. We want to get this back leg, the empty leg from them, to send people to Cancun. So if you have any idea in your mind, please talk to me. We want to do something to send these people out of Brazil during this period. And the vacation, the school vacation, as you know, I think Brazil has a school vacation in the month of July. The World Cup will start on June 12th. And they let all the schools to decide whenever they want to make the vacation. So some of the schools will be exactly the same dates of the World Cup. And we want to make the groups to go out of Brazil in the first day of the World Cup.
Anybody else have anything to say?
I guess just from looking at it, and I can only comment really on Air Europa's statistics, but we're certainly seeing a real influx in tickets purchased to Salvador, and again there is a direct link there into the times of travel and round about the World Cup next year. And so even though people don't know where, you know, as a Scotsman we haven't qualified, so I'm not that bothered, but England qualifying, you know, we don't know where they're going to be playing, but there's still this demand for, I want to be there, I want to experience the culture, I want to experience the whole atmosphere of Brazil. And so, and I know speaking with a lot of the tour operators, it's been a real challenge for them to package up any type of offering, because they just don't know where England are going to play. And again, it's the same with a lot of our European markets, whether it be Italy, France, Spain, and Portugal. There is just this lack of knowledge of what is actually, you know, where's the demand going to come. But that's not stopping people purchasing flights and pre-booking in the hope that, you know, they might strike it lucky. And if they don't, they still get to experience Brazil and see some football. But we've certainly seen a peak. And it's actually, for talking about access into Brazil over that period, I think it is going to be, there's more capacity there, with us obviously bringing more capacity there, but it's going to be, it's a peak time. So as an airline, that's again an opportunity there's only limited capacity, the demand's going to be very high, and so I don't think it's going to be a cheap option to get into Brazil. And so people are trying to jump ahead of the rise in prices as you get closer, and so people are trying to take advantage of that at the moment.
Anybody else have anything to say? No? I would just, it happens to be a subject which I care about rather a lot. Maybe I shouldn't talk about it. But I would just stress that Rio has to be extremely careful. This is now a very, very dangerous time for Rio. It's a very dangerous time for Brazil inbound tourism if they have not one but two mega events within 2 years of each other. They need to look very carefully at what happened in South Africa, a destination of not dissimilar size and attractiveness for long-haul markets. They need to look very carefully at what happened in London, both in terms of prediction and in terms of delivery. The fear I have is that the inbound market for Brazil will be severely damaged for 2 very significant years, where the expectation will go through the roof. And there tends to be a really shocking disparity between what people say is going to happen in terms of influx of visitors and what actually arrives. And this is teamed with a total silence after the event as to what actually happened. There's very little posthumous analysis of what goes on in these events. But I've said enough on that subject. They're just words of warning. There was a gentleman at the back wanting to ask a question. Excellent, please. You have the microphone as well.
Is it working?
Yeah. It's working.
I wanted to go back to outbound tourism from Brazil. You mentioned 11 days on average stay in Europe, something like 3 different countries. You also said the first time they visit, it's more for sightseeing, to see the countries their families originated from. What I wanted to ask is, do they come to Europe on a second trip maybe, or to go to the beach, to go to the sun, to go to visit some islands around the Mediterranean, or what do you see in that respect?
Eduardo,
Yeah.
you specialize.
I
in
mean,
these things.
they come to Europe for different, everybody's a little bit different in the way they travel. But in Brazil, there's something which is very specific. Is traveling is part of a status quo, and it's part of your personal brand building. So it depends on where your hobbies are. You will come to Europe maybe to a concert or to a soccer match, or for shopping, depending on how you are. And in social media, and when analyzing social media, you see the trends there, and you see that people are getting more interested in like music festivals, about, I don't know, techno music, something very specific. So the answer to your question is rather complicated, but I see the future of traveling. Of course, newcomers will go to the London Tower and to Pisa and to Amsterdam, to see the sites like everybody did in the past, or everybody has done it once, to tackle it. But in the future will be as more customized travel and more trying to build your personal brand and sharing that on the social media and try to get your own identity and social profile, if you want to call it this way.
Was that a question at the back, or were you just waving? He was waving. Sorry, sir, were you waving or asking a question? No, the gentleman in front of you was waving. Don't worry. Do we have any more questions, ladies and gentlemen?
Can I say something on the last question?
Oh no, please do. Yes.
He mentioned sunshine, beaches, those traditional holidays. The research we did, not surprisingly, showed that Brazilians have no interest in coming to Europe for the weather or the beaches because they have all that. And I think that the word culture is key. So you have, as we touched on there, and I think it's very interesting what would be seen as street culture. And we interviewed lots of people. Say, as you mentioned, they were into skateboarding. They might want to go to Holland or London or Berlin and be into that, or if they're into DJing, there's that. And then you've got the high culture, of course, everything from the Louvre, etc. And then again the consumerist angle. Brazilians were the only people who I've ever heard self-describe as I am a consumerist, because there it's such a relatively new thing to have this plethora of brands and the excitement of brands that it isn't almost, I think it would be a sort of a dirty word to describe yourself as a consumerist. So there's street culture, high culture, and shopping culture, I would say, is the holy trinity for Brazilians in Europe.
Thank you. Now, before we start, I was just wanting to know, just to go through the panel one by one, as we started off, very simple set of questions. Brazil, will it grow, the market for Europe, over the next 3 years? What will grow? What is going to grow most? And where do you think these people are going to go? 3 questions. Is it going to grow? What will grow? Where are they going to go? I'll start with Eduardo on my far
So your first
side.
question is going to grow? Yes.
Right, that's fine.
Second was
What will grow?
what?
Which sector?
Especially FIT, individual travelers, will be it's going to be the Brazilian market of the future. They want to have more customized experiences and not to be clustered in just a package. This is something that Brazilians are not going to be up to in the next 10 years. I mean, this, Marco, maybe you can say if that's true or not, because you have the numbers. But I think they are looking for more, something more adapted to your personality and more flexible product. And your third question was, sorry?
Where will they go? It's
Where?
a very difficult question for you to answer.
I don't have a glass ball
No,
here,
you don't
but
have a
I could say they will go to...
Eduardo also represents every country in Europe, or nearly every country in Europe. So to pick any particular country is slightly invidious. But
yeah, but I would say Eastern Europe will grow, definitely. And new destinations, Montenegro, Serbia, they will start attracting people through the Danube routes and so on. I think Eastern Europe it's going to be strong in the next years. So.
Simon, what do you think?
I think it will grow not as strongly as it grew in 2010 and 2011, when there was an enormous growth in travel, and then it stalled a little due to currency reasons last year. As to where, I think it's back to this sort of specialization, this niche thing. I think they will go to different countries, but I also think that they will get more submerged in the culture of places like London or Milan, or, whatever they're, as I said, you know, there's a very young population, so they may be into all sorts of niche things, and they will just explore them and go deeper into the different European countries that interest them.
From my perspective, I guess looking at it from an airline, with an airline hat on, I think that a lot of it will depend on what's going to happen with capacity, the frequency, the opportunity to travel, the cost of travel. I think the cost of travel does play its part. I know we haven't really spoken about the price sensitivity of Brazilians flying into Europe, but I think cost for all of us, whether you've got a lot of disposable income or not, it's a big factor. And so I think if the capacity can continue to increase and the prices become more competitive, then I think that will help stimulate growth. But in terms of the other questions of where that growth will come, I think London is a global attraction, and I think as ourselves and other airlines look at continuing to expand into Brazil, I think that will also help increase the likelihood that could be a key market for them.
Okay.
Yes, we will grow. I think we will stay around 10% per year. I would say that. Of course, it depends on capacity. Sometimes you see Brazilians coming to Europe through Canada, through United States, because we don't have any space. And it's true. I buy in my tour operator lots of space with American through New York. Where I think that Italy, Spain, France, Portugal, but it all depends on the soap operas and the telenovelas. If they come up with something about Croatia, you have to find space in Croatia because we have 80 million people watching the telenovelas, and we see this happening so fast. We had one last year to Turkey. We have now a daily flight to Turkey. Yeah, Turkish is flying to Brazil. We had in the past to Morocco, to India, to Dubai. Now we're having one to Peru. Is that right, Marina? Peru, they're increasing a lot of capacity to Peru. So if a country wants to bring more Brazilians, they have to speak to Global TV there. Spend some money, and they're going to have the Brazilians.
Lawrence?
Myself, I think that economy allowing, and more specifically the currency rate allowing, the Brazilian outbound market will still keep growing. I share the opinion of Marco. Really think the TV, the whole the industrial culture, it's very important in determining what Brazilians are going to be doing in terms of getting on their next holidays. And Brazilians are very curious people, so more and more they'll be looking for exotic destinations. And when I say exotic destinations, not necessarily besides Asia. For us, many things that happen here in Europe are exotic for us. So it's just a question of showcasing that the European destinations showcase them. There are different attractions. There are not really well-known attractions. They'll be successful in attracting more and more Brazilians and getting a really very steady stream of revenue coming in their countries.
Well, fantastic. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you very much, audience. I think the prospect of a 10% growth per year is one worthy of salivating about. I think I would just stress that the one thing we haven't touched on this panel, and I will just leave you with a passing thought, that this 10% growth in indeed this business is contingent on there being no visa restrictions with Brazil being imposed from Europe. Occasionally we hear a whistlebird down the line that this might be possible. It is utterly crucial that the channels of commerce and communication are as open as possible for this business to continue and to prosper. Ladies and gentlemen, will you thank me in thanking Eduardo Santander, Simon O'Connell, Colin Stewart, Marco Fraz, and Lawrence Reinisch for talking to you today. Thank you very much, ladies.